You hear it all the time, right? AI and robotics are going to change everything. But what if that change is so huge, so fundamental, that it could actually end capitalism itself? Now, I know, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but today, we're going to put that very idea to the test.
So could they really do it? Could a world filled with super smart machines and non-stop automation actually make our entire economic system just obsolete? Instead of just shouting yes or no, we're going to treat this as a serious thought experiment.
And to pull this off, we're going to use a really cool technique called steelmanning. Basically, it means we're going to build the absolute strongest, most convincing case possible for how AI could end capitalism, even if we're a bit skeptical. You know, it's the only honest way to see if an argument like this really has legs.
Okay, so let's get into it. Let's build our steelman case. For capitalism as we know it to actually disappear, it's not just one thing that has to go wrong. Nope, 4 of the most fundamental pillars of our economy would have to completely crumble.
So for capitalism to fall, these 4 dominoes have to be knocked over. First, scarcity pretty much ends. Robots and AI make stuff like food and energy so cheap they're almost free. Second, wage labor becomes a thing of the past. Humans just aren't needed for jobs anymore. Third, private ownership starts to feel unstable. The whole idea of owning things just doesn't make sense for society. And finally, markets themselves become obsolete. We find a better way to get things to people. If all 4 of those things happen, yeah, the whole system as we know it could be toast.
To really get how this collapse could happen, first we need to understand how things work right now. Just think of our economy like a giant looping cycle, kind of like the water cycle you learned about in school, but for money.
It's a really simple loop when you think about it. Companies produce goods. To do that, they pay people wages. Those people then take their wages and, well, they consume. They buy the stuff that was just produced. That consumption creates profit for the companies, and that profit gets plowed right back into more production. It's a beautiful self-powering circle.
Okay, now here's the kicker. This is where automation just walks in and shatters the whole thing. If you fully automate production, you get rid of human jobs. And when you do that, you sever the wage link. But hold on, without wages, who's buying anything? And if no one's buying anything, where do the profits come from? The whole cycle just grinds to a dead stop.
But wait, it's not just about workers' wages. Our steelman argument has to go deeper. It has to ask an even bigger question. What about the owners? The capitalists themselves? What do they actually do, and could they become obsolete too?
Well, it turns out owners and investors serve 3 really critical functions. First, they are the terminus of risk. They're the ones holding the bag if a business fails. It's their money on the line. Second, they provide decision compression. A single founder can make a bold, risky bet in a heartbeat. No committees needed. And third, they're a liability sink. When things go horribly wrong, society needs a human being to sue, to blame, or even to throw in jail.
So, for human owners to become truly obsolete, technology would have to pass 2 huge tests. First, you'd need the AI CEO, an AI that can run a company better than any human, period. That takes care of the management problem. Second, you'd need the crowd-funded hyperscaler. This would be a group of people, like a co-op or a DAO, who could successfully build a massive, cutting-edge AI data center without needing a billionaire to write the check. If you can replace both the CEO and the founder, the argument for private ownership gets a whole lot weaker.
Okay, so that's the steelman. It's the strongest, most plausible argument for the end of capitalism. But now it's time for a hard reality check. Let's start poking holes in this thing and see where it falls apart. Right here, right now.
And almost immediately, our big litmus tests slam right into 2 giant walls. First, there's the physics wall. Turns out, you can't train a world-class AI on a decentralized network. The speed of light itself creates too much delay. You need massive data centers with all the chips packed tightly together. And then there's the liability wall. Society needs a throat to choke. You can't sue an algorithm. You can't put code in jail. You need a person to hold accountable.
And all of this points to an absolutely crucial idea. Automation doesn't get rid of scarcity. It just moves it somewhere else. The new choke points, the new rare resources, aren't smart humans anymore. They're physical things, unbelievable amounts of energy, the most advanced computer chips on the planet, and just getting the simple permission to build these giant facilities. Controlling these is the new source of power. So, if our steelman argument doesn't quite hold up today, and capitalism doesn't just end, then what happens? Well, all the signs point not to an end, but to a wild mutation. A radical transformation so the system can survive. Because the core problem, that broken loop, is still there.
How do you create demand for products in a world without paychecks? Solving that puzzle isn't just some small adjustment. It would be, and I quote, the single largest structural shift in economic history. It's a huge deal.
So how could it possibly work? Well, one of the most interesting ideas out there is something called sovereign equity. Imagine a massive, state-owned investment fund, kind of like what Norway has with its oil money. But this one would be capitalized by taxes on all this new automation, and the fund would then pay dividends, like a universal basic income, directly to every single citizen. It creates a brand new pipeline for demand that has nothing to do with a 9-to-5 job.
And suddenly, you have a new economic cycle, a new loop. It starts with sovereign equity funded by automation taxes. That pays out a citizen dividend to everyone. That dividend creates mass demand as people spend their money. And that demand is met by, you guessed it, mass automation. The loop is closed again. The system works, just without traditional wages at its core.
So this all brings us to a gigantic fork in the road. As automation gets more and more powerful, we're left with two very, very different futures. And the path we end up on won't be decided by the technology itself. It'll be decided by us. Down one path is automation without distribution. That's the dystopian sci-fi future. The owners of all this tech basically secede from society. You get walled cities, a new super elite, and Elysium scenario. But the other path is automation with distribution. In that future, the wage dies so that the market itself can live. That leads to things like sovereign equity, a universal high income, and a society where everyone benefits.
So in the end, technology isn't leading us to one specific outcome. It's not destiny. It's just presenting us with a choice between a society of walled gardens for the few and a society of shared prosperity for the many. So the real question isn't what the robots will do, it's what we will decide. Which future are we going to build?